Yeah, so Wayne the barefoot mechanic was gonna come and help me get this body onto the pan, but now he's tied up with something or whatever, I don't know, and I'm so keen to do this now that I'm going to give it a shot here by myself. So it's just going to be me, myself and I, the three of us. Oh, and by the way, welcome to the shop. My name is Dev, and we are working on my wife's project. We call it the Renault bug, where I'm busy marrying this 1959 Renault 4CV body to a shortened Beetle floor pan. There's been quite a number of videos on it already if you want to go check it out. So yeah, let's give this a shot and see how it goes. I think this is the point where I'm going to be scratching my new paint, because I got no one else to watch out for me. No, that's not too bad. Oh, I see a little problem in there. Yeah, kind of hard to see, but I'm here on the inside and look right there. There's that brake line. Now if I still have to drop this down, but if I go down any further, I'm going to chop that ticking brake line in half with this firewall. I need to provide an opening there, some clearance. I'm gonna have to take this whole body off again so I can cut that. So up we go again. These are the pleasures of custom building. Such a small little detail that is so important. And if you see things moving here on the screen, there's nothing wrong with your eyes. Got the body suspended from the roof, and I was just saying my little prayers whilst I was crawling in under here to make that all quickly. And now my OCD has kicked in, and I have decided I'm going to do my caster shims first. I mean, it does make sense. It's just so much easier to do all of that with the body still off. Put the body on some trestles so it doesn't swing all over the place. And I've got the front end already jacked up so I can check things out.
A few minutes later.
I'm going to make my own caster shims. It's just so much easier and quicker than having to order it from somewhere and waiting goodness knows how long for it to arrive. And those of you who know me, you know I'm a sucker for punishment anyway. But it's actually pretty easy to do. So what I've got here is 2 pieces of pipe. Now this piece of pipe, let me put it like that. The outside diameter of this piece of pipe is exactly the same as the front beam. And this piece here of pipe, the inside diameter is the same as the front beam. So the idea is to stick them together like that. I can now just weld it up, and I've created myself a caster shim. Because now this outside diameter here and that inside diameter there is exactly the same. So it will take up that space. You will see later if you don't know what I mean. So I have been fine-tuning this a little bit. I measured it here. And I have decided on a 9mm. That's the thickness here. Just a little bit less than 3/8. Why 9mm? I have no idea. Just sounds like a nice number to me. Yeah, too much caster. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Just makes your steering a bit heavier. But we'll see. We can experiment. If it doesn't work, I can make one that's a little bit thinner here. So here's more of a top view with the 2 pieces clamped together. And I have now cut and grinded it so that this distance across here measures 9mm on both sides.
20 minutes later.
And there you go. Welded, a little time with the grinder and a file. And we now have ourselves a pair of custom caster shims. Okay, so let's fit these puppies. I've slackened off the bolts here, holding the front beam in place. I've knocked in a wedge there from below, a wooden wedge, so that this beam can actually move away from the frame head. So there's a gap in there now. It's a bit difficult to see. My shim, caster shim, sits nicely on the beam. So now I should be able to just slide this into that gap. Yes, there we go. That's a bit too much. Right there, you can see my shim now in position. So it sits in between the front beam and the frame head. So what have we actually done here now is we have moved the bottom beam forward by the thickness of the shim, which in my case is 9mm, or a little bit less than 3/8 of an inch. Now if you install caster shims, you cannot reuse the original bolts. They will be too short because of that extra space required for your shim. And I'm going to show it to you here. I'm going to put this bolt right in here until it just touches the thread, which is right there. And this gap that I see here is now only about in the region of 6-7mm or so, 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, and that's not enough thread. The rule of thumb, the amount of thread needs to be at least the same as the diameter of the bolt. In this case we've got an M12 bolt, so we would want at least 12mm of thread there. So this is too short. I'm going to need a longer bolt. And the good folks at Mesco Engineering Supplies could help me out with exactly what I want. This original bolt is 90mm long, and these new ones, is 100 millimeters long, which is exactly what I want, because my shim I made 9 millimeters thick. So yeah, that makes up for exactly what I want. I'm always amazed by the variety and range of stock that Mesco Engineering Supplies carry. Well done, you guys. Oh, by the way, my new bolts is also high tensile, 8.8, exactly the same as the original ones. So now I can fit my longer bolts. So as always, I like to put a little bit of copper compound on my threads to prevent future corrosion and seizing and all of that stuff. So that'll just make the life for someone down the line much easier. If it's not me, it will be some other lucky dude. Oh, and there's another thing, this thread on these bolts, this is M12 by 1.5 millimeter pitch, which is also called metric fine thread. It's a little bit finer than a standard M12, which is 1.75 millimeters pitch. So now we can just tighten up these fellows and then we'll be good. The factory torque setting for these bolts are 36 foot-pounds, but I'm going to go a little bit more to about 42 foot-pounds. I just feel that we do need a little bit more torque because of the caster shims. If you look at the torque chart for bolts, the spec for a grade 8.8 M12 bolt is 63 foot-pounds for lubricated and 83 for not lubricated. And that's 80% of yield strength. So going a little bit more is perfectly safe. Don't want to go to the extreme though, because I don't want to hurt those threads that's welded into the frame head. I mean, if you damage those, you got a real problem. If that, cut it out and weld new ones in, that's a pain in the ass. So I think we're good now. So I also made some new lock plates while we're at this. Easy enough to make them from a piece of scrap sheet metal. These old ones, yeah, they're a little crusty and worn out. So now we can just bend these tabs over and then we've got it all locked in place and tightened and proper. Okay, and just a lick of paint to stay with the program here. It's turning into a beautiful autumn day here, so I could get rid of my sweater. So now why did I do that? Why did I install those caster shims? Well, the short answer, it will improve tracking and steering stability, especially at higher speeds. So that will make it a safer ride and a more comfortable ride, which is important, especially for my wife. But you know what, now my father taught me to always question the how and the why of something until I fully understand it. So that answer is not good enough for me. So maybe we should get into the long answer, which is all to do with steering geometry, caster angles and stuff like that. Now for a little bit of background, I spent the time and I researched pretty much every video I could find on YouTube about caster shims and why they are being used. And you know what? Every single one of them, as far as I can remember, gets it wrong. It's kind of like an urban myth scenario maybe, you know, somewhere a long time ago, someone said when you lower a bug, you must install caster shims, and from there onwards it just kept being done and being done without ever really questioning why or the reason for doing it. And everybody just assumed that you have to install caster shims when you lower a bug. I'm not saying you should not use caster shims. I'm saying that I don't understand the reason for doing it. Yeah, I'm thinking of one particular video, in fact there were more than one, where they said to, when you lower the bug, you should put the caster shims in the bottom, and when you raise it for off-road applications, you should put it in the top. It's never going to work. Yes, so if you don't believe me, I'm going to prove all of this to you. Hey, be warned, it's about to get quite technical, but very interesting if you are a tech geek like me. So why don't we step over to the forest engineering CAD office and we dig deeper into this topic. Join me. So welcome to the forest engineering cardboard assisted design shop, where we build models from more than just cardboard. We use nails, sticks, dirty bits of wood, whatever we can find to explore concepts and get better understanding. So what you see here is a side view of the Beetle front suspension. The dimensions are full size. I did actually take them from the front suspension itself. So here you can see your shock tower. These are your torsion arms, your spindle or stub axle carrier. There's even your steering arm. And excuse my dirty fingers, but these are the only ones I have, so you're going to have to bear with them. So let's just take it through a suspension movement, just so that we can see what happens. There you go. That is a suspension movement up and down. We just hit a bump. So this blue line here represents the center line of your kingpin, and it will then be the axis around which your spindle is, or your stub axle rotates when you turn the steering wheel. So here we're kind of looking at it from the front, and you turn the steering wheel. That's approximately what starts happening. We're rotating around that blue center line. Does that make sense? Right, and here's the real deal. So the blue stick represents the center line through my kingpin, and it's therefore also the axis around which the spindle or stub axle rotates, as you can see right here. Back in the CAD office, and there's our blue line again. Now let's add this red line to the picture. And let's assume that this red line is vertical, or in other words perpendicular to ground level. And now let's do this. And that right there, the difference between the vertical red line and our blue line, that's caster angle. If it's moved backwards, it's positive caster angle, and if we were to move it this way, it would be negative caster angle. So in common cars, this positive caster angle will be in the region of 3 to 5 degrees, normally more pronounced with rear-wheel drive cars, but in race cars, it can be as much as 12 to 13 degrees, depending on the application. So now why would we want caster angle? Well, the main reason is to give stability to the steering wheel. A clever answer is that a realignment moment or torque is generated every time an attempt is made to move the wheel away from the straight ahead position. So it's a self-alignment business. That angle is small, realignment will be slow and more bland, whilst a higher angle would give a more marked return. It can get a lot more complicated than that, especially with wishbone and McPherson strut setups, where camber and other geometry options can also be adjusted. Then clever stuff like mechanical trail and dynamic cornering behavior comes into play. So luckily we are playing with the basic simple engineering of a Volkswagen Beetle, so we don't have to worry about all that clever rocket science stuff. Hey, how's it, Kai? Are you alone?
Hey, wow, look at this. Progress. I love this.
You like the black wheels?
I love this.
Huh?
Yeah, and the Volkswagen and hubcaps.
Oh, great, man. I'm so happy you like it.
I
So,
love it. I love it.
so yes, the owner of the car has just walked in.
So this silver part would be... Are you moving the tire? Move it. Come on, move it. Wow, look at that. Move it. There we go.
So what did you say about the silver part?
I would assume that's the gearbox, yes?
The what?
The gearbox?
Yes, it's the gearbox. Or in,
Yes, in my limited car knowledge.
yeah, well done. Yes, our mates in the US talk about the transmission or the transaxle, but yeah, we're in South Africa, we call it the gearbox.
Okay. And then the other little cylinder things, I'm not too sure about that.
So tell me one thing, am I in line then for a few more nice suppers?
Yes, I think it will be roast chicken with all the trimmings tonight.
All the trimmings, there we go. Thanks, babes.
And maybe even some oat cookies. I'm going to make a batch.
Hi, we like the idea of some oat biscuits or cookies or whatever. Push it, Kai. See if you can roll it. So we are looking at the suspension setup of a Beetle. So let's get a little bit more Beetle specific. Your stock VW Beetle actually has very little caster angle, if any. So if I can introduce a little more caster angle, this is what we'll get. We will increase the steering feel of the car with more feedback via the steering wheel. That speed of recentering the steering wheel will increase, our high speed stability will improve, and it will allow more immediate reaction when you steer. So now, assuming that wheel balance and towing and that kind of stuff is good, with very little or zero caster angle, the car will wander all over the road and feel unstable. If you've ever driven a Beetle at high speeds, you'll know what I'm talking about. The infamous death wobble. So the downfall of more caster angle is that it makes the steering heavier and requires more force to turn the wheels. And I suspect that the original Beetle never had much caster angle because it's more like this. And this was because it was never designed to be a highway car to be driven at 80 miles an hour. I think they thought that lighter steering would be more important for the typical people's car application, easier maneuvering at lower speeds, easier parking, that sort of thing. So now, of course, in the real world we can't introduce more caster angle by doing this. It's not possible because our kingpin position is fixed with the bushes and the carrier there. So that's where the caster shims will come into play. But before we look at that, let's first lay the myths and the fallacies and the misinformation to rest. So all these videos about caster shims claim that the caster angle will change when you drop the suspension, like this. And that's why you have to fit caster shims. Well, let's go and find out if that is actually true. Okay, so keep your eye on that vertical line and see if you can detect any change in the angle when I lower the suspension or raise the suspension, or even if I go through an extreme suspension movement. Look at that. There's no angle change. The red line remains vertical. That means there's no change in caster angle. Prove that those stories are freaking BS, man. Now, to be fair, there's an important exception here. If you lower the front suspension only without adjusting the rear, or even if you only fit large wheels in the back and small ones in the front, the rake of the floor pan will be changed. In other words, the floor pan will no longer be parallel to the ground and will slant forward. Then this is what effectively happens. Look here. What has happened? We've effectively created negative caster now, which is a bad thing. It's important to note though that this change or effect is caused by the frame rake and not a change in the suspension setup. So yeah, my yard art mock-up bar bug that was the donor for that floor pan that I'm using for the Renault bug is an extreme example of a slanted frame, although I suppose slanted pan would probably be a better description. There's a difference here between here and here of at least 6 inches. So if you ever were to build something this ridiculous in real life, you would definitely have to do some radical changes to your caster angle to make it drivable. Otherwise it would actually just be all over the road and you would not be able to handle it at any sort of speed. So let's assume that our pan is parallel to the ground, like you have in a stock Beetle. We haven't changed our suspension setup at all, so this is also original. Now if I install a shim behind the lower beam, in between the lower beam and the frame head, this is effectively what's going to happen, right? We've introduced some caster angle. And this is the only way to get more caster angle on a link pin Beetle is by using caster shims and installing them in the correct spot. There's no other way to adjust it because you have no adjustment here where the kingpin and the bushes sit. Let's do that again. But with no caster shims, stick a caster shim down in the bottom between the lower beam and the frame head, and we introduce caster angle. How cool is that? So this is what I'm doing. My pan is pretty much level and parallel to the ground. I inserted the shim there between the lower beam and the frame head, and I get more positive caster angle like that. And once I've installed my caster shims, I've now introduced some more positive caster angle, and it doesn't matter where I set my suspension up when I lower it, the caster angle remains throughout. Now some of these videos also advocate that you fit the caster shims in the top. Once you've raised the suspension like I've done here, you can see it's dropped right down. So let's do that. Let's stick a caster shim in there and see what happens. No man, I'm creating negative caster angle again here. Another BS story. So I believe the caster shims you can buy is a 1/4 inch thick, 6mm. And since this model of mine is full size, let's see if we can measure how much angle change we get. I've made a little mark there. So I've moved it 6mm, 1/4 inch to get that angle. You can see it, that little bit makes quite a big difference. I've made my shim 9mm thick, moves it to there. So I can now measure this angle here, then I will know how much caster angle I've got now. And in this case it's positive, which is what we want. So I projected these lines here on my board, measure the angles, and this is what I get. So with a 6mm shim or 1/4 inch shim, gives me about 3.5 degrees positive caster angle, and my 9mm shim gives me plus minus 5 degrees. Now I'm not saying this is super accurate. To get a perfectly super accurate answer, you would need to do a nice drawing, but I think for our purposes this is good enough. And those figures, they sound nice to me. I'm going to try the 9mm that I've got installed already, and we will evaluate it, and if need be, we can always make a thinner one. I'm actually quite sure that there must be instances where you would easily be able to use 2 of these commercially available shims to get a total of about 1/2 inch or 12mm. So with my 9mm caster shims installed and my pan level, here you can see the difference between my spirit level, which is vertical, and the front edge of my shock tower. There. So that does look like quite a bit. Is it too much? I don't think so. I know improved or increased caster angle makes the steering heavier, like we said before. But in this case, the Renault Bug's body is going to be very light in comparison to the original Beetle. Plus, I'm not going to have a fuel tank up front. That will also be in the back. So I think we will be fine. But you know, once we've got it driving, we can evaluate. And if need be, we can reduce this a little bit by making thinner cast shims. It's not a difficult job to pull them out and install other ones. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think we're going to be cool. Well then, all of that has certainly given me some clarity on this whole caster shim business. And I hope it was the same for you. I'm sure my thinking was right. But if you think I screwed up somewhere, please let me know. Always happy to learn from other guys. Yes man, but all of this thinking required a lot of energy. And my wife Ali did mention something about cookies. So I think I'm going to head down to the house to see what I can scavenge to replenish my fuel tank. So yeah, that's it for today. I think next time what we're going to do is get this Renault body onto the floor pan, and then we can evaluate what we need to do to the fenders to accommodate those fat little wheels. I can't wait to get into that. So thanks for hanging out with me. I enjoyed your company. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a lucky one, my brothers.
Whatever makes you happy, it just depends on you. So think a little bigger and dream what you could do.